Jackson pushed Taylor against a tree in the middle of the field. The two of them continued to kiss passionately. Their breathing became more rapid as time seemed to pass too quickly. And they knew they couldn't waste a second. They were hasty, but at the same time full of emotion. Jackson's touches, all of Taylor's gestures, carried the intensity of nostalgia and fear of being discovered. Welcome to our channel. If you love emotional and engaging love stories, then come to our channel. Here we will bring you stories full of touching and engaging surprises. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any interesting stories. In today's video, we would like to send you a question. The story is called The Married Sister. Please follow along. That winter, the cold has begun to spread to the city after days of drizzling rain. New York, as usual, is covered in a gloomy colour. The streets are bustling as everyone is busy preparing for New Year's Day. Jackson is no exception. After a year of hard work, he is eager to return to his hometown to reunite with his family. But unlike previous years, this time Jackson feels a bit bored and tired in his heart. It seems that everything in his life is gradually becoming boring and repetitive. Jackson is a 27-year-old man working in the IT field with a stable job and a good income. Jackson has an independent life in the city. He is good-looking, cheerful, but quite lonely. Since moving to New York, he has lived alone without any really deep relationships. His life revolves around work, gatherings with friends, and then returning to his empty apartment. That afternoon, Jackson decided to leave the office earlier than usual, intending to go for a walk before returning to his familiar rented room. He had not made an appointment with anyone, just wanted to find a different atmosphere in the heart of New York, which was bustling with preparations for Tet. Jackson's footsteps led him to a small coffee shop called Coffee Kai Uk, hidden in a corner of the old town. The space here was quiet, a bit old-fashioned, with artistic paintings on the walls and rows of old wooden tables and chairs. Jackson chose a corner to sit near the window, ordered a cup of hot coffee, and quietly looked out onto the street. The streetlights began to turn on, reflecting through the glass doors, creating a warm scene in the cold of winter. He sighed, thinking about the upcoming Tet holidays. Even though he was returning home to reunite, Jackson still felt an inexplicable loneliness. Suddenly, his eyes stopped at a woman who had just entered the shop. She was wearing a long beige coat. Her face was delicate, but a little tired. Her eyes were sad, as if she was filled with many thoughts. She sat down at a nearby table, ordered a cup of hot tea, then leaned back in her chair, gently removing her scarf. Jackson could not help but be attracted by her charm and sophistication. After a while of looking at her, Jackson began to notice the small details: her soft, flowing hair, her delicate red lips, and her gentle but attractive gestures. He did not know why he was so attracted, but he could not take his eyes off that woman. Her name is Taylor, 31 years old, an accountant for a construction company. Taylor's life is not lacking in material things, but she lacks emotional attention from her husband. He is a construction engineer, often has to go on business trips, leaving Taylor alone at home. They have been married for 3 years, but their married life does not have much time for each other, and until now they still do not have children. Taylor is used to long, quiet days in the big house, where silence and loneliness prevail. In that short moment, Taylor did not notice that someone was looking at her. She just wanted to escape into a private space, away from the worries of life and the hustle and bustle of the city. But then her eyes and Jackson's suddenly met when she looked up from her cup of tea. Jackson felt a little embarrassed, but Taylor just smiled gently and turned away. After a while, Jackson mustered up the courage to walk to Taylor's table. He hesitantly said, "Excuse me, do you mind if I sit with you?" Taylor looked at Jackson with a bit of surprise, but then nodded in agreement. Their conversation started quite naturally. Jackson introduced himself, about his work and life in the city. Taylor listened, occasionally responding with gentle sentences, but it seemed like she didn't want to talk too much about herself. After a while, Jackson learned that Taylor also lived in New York, not far from his boarding house. They began to talk about life here, about the loneliness they both faced. Taylor talked about her accounting job, about the pressures of work and family life she was going through. Although Jackson didn't ask much, he felt that Taylor had something hidden, a sadness that she didn't want to reveal. After that unexpected encounter, Jackson couldn't stop thinking about Taylor. There was something special about her that attracted him, not only because of her appearance, but also because of the quiet and calm way she spoke. A few days later, Jackson decided to take the initiative to text Taylor, inviting her to have coffee again. This time they met at another, quieter cafe located near the lake, Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis Reservoir. "Do you come here often?" Jackson asked, his voice tinged with curiosity. "Only sometimes, when I feel like I need some quiet time," Taylor replied, her eyes looking far away towards the lake. Jackson understood that Taylor's life was not as simple as she appeared, and he was increasingly drawn into her world, a world full of quiet thoughts and nameless sadness. They talked more, shared more about their personal lives. The dates gradually became more frequent, and Jackson began to realize that he no longer felt as lonely as before with Taylor by his side. That night, when the city had begun to sink into darkness, Jackson suddenly received a text message from Taylor. Their date was no longer the quiet coffee date like before. Taylor texted with an unusual invitation. "Are you free? I want to go for a drink." Jackson didn't need to think. He quickly replied, "Okay, I'll pick you up. Where are we going?" Taylor replied with a smiley icon, along with the address of a bar located in a small street behind Central Park's The Pond. Unlike the previous dates, this time Jackson felt something strange in Taylor's invitation. It seemed like she was looking for something more than just the usual intimate conversations. When Jackson arrived, Taylor was already waiting outside the bar. She was wearing a tight black leather jacket, combined with skinny jeans that revealed her long legs, her face lightly made up but still exuded charm. Jackson was a little surprised to see Taylor, but he quickly hid that feeling and smiled. "Hello, do you want to change today?" Jackson joked, but his eyes still did not leave Taylor's appearance. Taylor shrugged. "I just want to try something different. I don't want to think too much today. I just want to relax." The two walked into the bar. The atmosphere in the bar was noisy with loud music. Dim lights covered the room. Taylor led Jackson to a small corner table, ordered a few drinks for both of them. At first, the two of them just drank slowly, chatting like usual, but as the glasses of wine gradually emptied, the conversation between them began to become closer, and the atmosphere also became different. Jackson was not used to drinking much alcohol, but to please Taylor, he drank a few more drinks with her. Taylor smiled more, her eyes sparkling, her lips as red as cherries under the flickering lights of the bar. Sometimes she leaned her head on Jackson's shoulder, giggling about endless stories. Jackson felt the warmth of Taylor's body, the faint scent of perfume, making him unable to contain his confusion. "You're drunk," Jackson said softly, worried as Taylor leaned closer and closer to him. "I'm fine. It's just that I haven't been this comfortable in a long time. Don't you like me drinking?" Taylor squinted at him, a charming smile on her lips. Jackson didn't answer, but a strange feeling began to rise in his heart. Taylor was too close, too attractive, and Jackson knew that if things continued like this, he wouldn't be able to control himself. Even though he knew it was wrong, this feeling of closeness was too strong, overwhelming all rational thoughts in him. By the time they walked out of the bar, they were both tipsy. Taylor stumbled on her heels, leaning against Jackson. He could feel her warm breath and her soft fingers gripping his arm. "I want to go home, but I don't want to go home alone," Taylor whispered, her voice hoarse from the alcohol. Jackson looked at Taylor, her eyes no longer clear-headed, but instead seductive. In that moment, Jackson couldn't resist the temptation from Taylor. The attraction between them had exploded after many meetings, and now all reason in Jackson seemed to have been erased by emotion. They took a taxi to Taylor's house. In the car, Jackson tried to stay calm, but Taylor kept pressing her body against him, her head on his shoulder, her hot breath and her hands lightly gliding over his back, making Jackson's heart beat faster and faster. His mind no longer had room for Taylor anymore. The destination was a large but cold 3-story house. Taylor was trying to unlock the door, but her fingers seemed clumsy because of the alcohol. Jackson stood behind her, his eyes fixed on her thin shoulders in her light coat. The emotions that had been swirling in his head since the bar suddenly became clearer than ever. As the door opened, Taylor stepped inside, took off her high heels, and threw her coat on the sofa. Jackson followed, closing the door. The room was now eerily silent. The lingering alcohol in Jackson's body made his mind hazy, but an indescribable feeling welled up in his heart. Taylor turned to look at Jackson with a somewhat embarrassed gaze, her red lips slightly curved. "I drank too much. I probably shouldn't drink anymore." She smiled faintly, but that smile seemed unable to hide her nervousness. Jackson stood still looking at Taylor. His eyes were different from before. Taylor's eyes seemed to hypnotize him, pulling him forward unconsciously. He moved closer, feeling the warmth of her body as he stood next to her. The silence between them stretched. No words were spoken, but the atmosphere was getting heavier. "Miss Taylor," Jackson called softly, his voice deeper, containing hesitation mixed with expectation. Taylor didn't answer, just looked at Jackson. In that moment, both of them understood that what was about to happen was inevitable. There was no reason to explain, nor did they need to say it. All the emotions in their hearts were too clear, no longer needed words. Jackson stepped forward, his hand gently touching hers. Taylor was slightly startled but did not pull away. The warmth of Jackson's hand made Taylor's heart beat faster. They both knew that they had crossed the boundary they had set for themselves. Their breathing became more rapid as Jackson slowly pulled Taylor closer. There was no more distance, no more shyness. Taylor raised her face, her trembling lips opened slightly as if she wanted to say something, but then fell silent. In that moment, Jackson leaned down, his lips gently touching hers. It was a clumsy but emotional kiss, as if they had both waited for this moment for a long time. The scent of wine still lingered on their lips, mixed with intense desire, pulling them both into an unstoppable spiral. Taylor gently pushed Jackson away, not to refuse, but because she was overwhelmed with emotion. Her eyes were dreamy, but contained agreement. Taylor stepped back towards the bed, still holding Jackson's hand tightly, but not wanting to let go. Jackson's hand tightened on hers. He pulled Taylor closer. Both of them fell onto the soft bed. On the bed, nothing could stop them anymore. The dim light from outside shone in, illuminating Taylor's wonderfully red face. Jackson looked at Taylor, his whole body burning with desire. They lay there, breathing heavily, hand in hand, both of them trying to hold on to this moment. The kisses became more intense, the feeling of each other became more and more obvious. In their drunkenness, they let everything happen naturally, without regret, without fear. Tonight, this small room would become the place where new and passionate emotions began. A first time that both of them would never forget. The room was silent. Only the sound of both of their rapid breathing mixed with the beating of their hearts remained. Taylor lay under the dim light of the apartment, her eyes slightly closed, her red lips still smelling of alcohol and the kiss just now. Jackson looked at her, his heart pounding in his chest, feeling like he was falling into a deep pit of emotions. He no longer knew what he was doing, only feeling a wave rising in his heart. Taylor's body was right in front of him, seductive and fragile, as if it would disappear with just a light touch. Jackson's hand trembled as he touched her shoulder, pulling down the strap of her shirt, revealing her smooth white skin under the light. Jackson paused for a moment, his eyes unable to leave her. Taylor lay there silently, but her body moved slightly, as if responding to his every touch. Jackson's hand continued to touch Taylor's soft skin, feeling her every breath as his hand slid lightly over her neck, over her shoulder, and down her arm. Taylor bit her lip, her eyes half closed, half opened as the unexpected feeling flooded her body. It was a feeling she had never experienced before, a combination of desire and anxiety, of attraction and excitement. Jackson leaned down, his lips touching her skin, feeling the warmth radiating from her body. Taylor trembled but did not refuse, had no intention of stopping. On the contrary, Taylor's body seemed to automatically respond to each of his rapid breathing, each of his touches, causing her to sink deeper into her emotions. Jackson wrapped his arms tightly around her, pulling her closer, the two of them entwined like passionate lovers, unable to be separated. His kisses on her neck, on her shoulder, each touch filled with desire, seemed to burn both of their bodies. In the small space of the room, the alcohol and passion mixed together, making them forget everything around them, leaving only instinct and emotion. Taylor breathed intermittently, her arms wrapped around Jackson's neck, pulling him closer. All the awkwardness, all the distance between the two seemed to have disappeared. They were no longer friends, no longer sister and brother, but now just two bodies that were blending together as if they could not stop. Jackson suddenly stopped, raised his head to look at Taylor, his eyes filled with hesitation. But there was also a bit of anticipation, as if he wanted to ask her if she was sure about this. But before he could say anything, Taylor pulled him down. Her lips found his again, stronger, more attractive. She didn't need to say anything. Her actions were enough to answer Jackson. Both of them were deeply immersed in each other, no longer able to distinguish time or space. This small room, the walls, the dim lights, everything seemed to disappear in that moment. They seemed to be lost in a world of only two people. Where all worries and barriers were left behind, Jackson felt Taylor's every move, every beat of her heart, and knew they had gone too far to turn back. The feeling was too compelling to stop, and that night all boundaries were broken. After a few intense moments, the room returned to its original silence. Only the sound of their slowing breathing echoed, blending with the quiet air of the late night. Jackson and Taylor lay side by side, the warmth of their bodies still spreading throughout the house. They were both exhausted, but they could clearly feel the unspoken connection that had just happened. Taylor lay on her side, her eyes dreamily looking out the window, where the lights from the streets outside shone in, creating sparkling streaks of light on the floor. Her heart beat slower, but strange emotions continued to explode. She didn't expect the night to end like this, didn't expect that this could happen between them. Her heart was mixed with the happiness she had just experienced and vague worries about the future. Jackson lay next to Taylor, his hand gently stroking Taylor's hair, feeling the softness slip through his fingers. Without saying anything more, he knew that they were both lost in their own thoughts. Tonight had changed everything. They had crossed a line that neither of them thought they would cross, and now complicated emotions were surging in each other's hearts. "Do you regret it?" Jackson asked softly, his voice low but still full of concern. He wasn't sure how Taylor felt at the moment, but he couldn't help but worry. Taylor was silent for a moment, then gently turned around. Her eyes rested on Jackson's face. Her gaze was no longer shy or worried, but calm. Taylor smiled, a small smile, but enough to melt away Jackson's worries. "No," Taylor replied softly, her voice gentle and genuine. "I don't regret it, it's just... we have to think more carefully about everything after tonight." Jackson nodded, understanding what she meant. They both knew that this couldn't just be a moment of impulse and then let it go. True emotions had burned and left a deep mark on their hearts. They both lay still, saying nothing more, just letting silence fill the space between them. In the dark night, even though they knew that life would be more complicated after this moment, they still felt a strange sense of peace. Tonight, no matter what, is a huge turning point for both Jackson and Taylor, and they know that nothing will ever be the same again. Since that intense and passionate encounter, Taylor and Jackson fell into a spiral of happiness but danger. As each day passed, the relationship between the two was no longer just a short meeting, but gradually became an indispensable part of both of their lives. They constantly texted each other, exchanging words full of desire, causing both of them to sink deeper into the whirlwind of emotions. Every morning, Taylor received a text from Jackson. No need for long words, just a short text was enough to make her heart beat faster. "Are you free? I want to see you." And just like that, they found each other everywhere, from Taylor's apartment to Jackson's boarding house, where the two could be more comfortable. The secretive noons, the afternoons running away from all curious eyes, both of them seemed to be immersed in emotions that no one could control. At Taylor's apartment, Jackson entered with increasing familiarity. Sometimes just the sound of the door lock rang. Taylor felt her heart pounding, knowing that Jackson had arrived. They rushed into each other without words, just eyes, kisses, and heavy breathing. In those moments, she felt as if all worries and ties had been swept away, leaving only the two of them and their overflowing emotions. Just like that, not only did Taylor's house become a place for them to escape from reality, Jackson and Taylor also often went to small hotels on deserted street corners, where they could temporarily forget about everyday life and immerse themselves in their own happiness. Every time they met, they tried to find new places, as if to renew their emotions, as if to keep the flame of desire alive. In that vortex, Taylor no longer felt the passage of time. Every day that passed, just knowing that Jackson would meet her, just seeing his text messages, Taylor felt at peace. Even though she knew that this was extremely dangerous, she couldn't stop. It wasn't just a physical passion, but also a kind of intense emotion that she had never experienced before. There were afternoons when they met at Jackson's house, where they could be more relaxed without worrying about time or the presence of others. In that space, they immersed themselves in happiness. The moments of intimacy became more intense than ever. Long kisses, tight hugs, as if they were afraid that time would take these moments away at any moment. Then one day, Taylor was sitting in her room, scrolling through old messages from Jackson, a smile appearing on her lips. At that time, she received a message from her husband. "I will be back on the 29th of Tet. We will shop for Tet together, my dear wife." The message made Taylor's heart heavy. Tomorrow, everything would change, her husband would return, and everything would have to go back to the way it was. This double life would have to end, at least for a long time. But what worried Taylor the most was that her feelings for Jackson did not fade, but on the contrary, they became deeper and more intense. Every time she looked at her phone, messages from Jackson kept appearing, making her feel uneasy. Jackson's message had just arrived. "I want to see you." Taylor knew clearly that this could be the last time they would be together before her husband returned, Unable to contain her longing, she texted back, "Okay, come. My husband will be back tomorrow." Not long after, the doorbell rang and Jackson walked in. His eyes were filled with longing, but also a bit of sadness. No one said much, just their eyes looking at each other, as if to say everything. Jackson approached Taylor, wrapped his arms around her waist, and pulled her into his embrace. They stood there silently for a brief moment, feeling each other's warmth, before instinct pulled them into a familiar vortex. Jackson's kiss quickly found Taylor's lips. No longer shy like before, it was a passionate kiss, as if they would never see each other again tomorrow. Jackson's hand gently slid along her waist, pulling her jacket down, revealing her smooth white skin. Her breathing was hurried, her heart beating erratically as she felt Jackson's hands explore every inch of her skin. Taylor couldn't stop. Emotions were surging inside her. They knew that this could be the last time they would be together like this, and that made everything stronger than ever. Taylor leaned back on the bed, her eyes still looking at Jackson with longing. Without another word, Jackson moved forward. His lips continued to explore every inch of her skin. The kisses were dense, full of desire and regret. Jackson's hands gently slid across her neck, down to her shoulders, then touched places that only they understood the familiarity. Their breaths mingled, the space seemed heavy with the strong emotions burning. Jackson leaned down and whispered in her ear, "Do you know how much I will miss you?" Taylor did not answer, only had time to breathe in broken sounds, feeling Jackson's lips brush against her skin. His whispers made Taylor's heart even more confused. Taylor knew that, even though they might not see each other again for a long time, this feeling would never disappear. Jackson's hands squeezed her tightly, as if wanting to hold on to every moment together. In the dim light of the room, their bodies blended together. There was no barrier between them. Jackson and Taylor were immersed in a stormy lovemaking session, full of passion and desire. Unlike the previous times, this time they were not simply looking for climax. This was a combination of all the emotions that they had been holding back for a long time. Every touch, every kiss, every breath contained regret, as if they were trying to hold on to every moment before everything ended. The rapid breathing, the desire mixed with the gentle sadness filled the air. Taylor hugged Jackson tightly, feeling every beat of his heart on her chest. The fun lasted for 2 hours, as if both were trying to hold on to every precious moment. When it was over, they lay side by side, saying nothing. Jackson silently stroked Taylor's hair, while Taylor lay still in his arms. There were no words to describe how they felt at that moment. They just quietly felt the closeness, knowing that tomorrow everything would change. After a while, Jackson softly said, "Will you miss me?" Taylor nodded slightly, her eyes still staring at the ceiling. "I will miss you, but we have to go back to our lives, right?" Her voice trembled, but she tried to sound strong. Jackson didn't answer, just held her tighter. He knew that they couldn't go on like this forever, but that didn't lessen the pain in his heart. They lay there in silence, leaving in the room the scent of regret and sadness of separation. Since her husband returned, Taylor and Jackson have not seen each other like before. They can only text each other back and forth. The text messages are full of longing and regret, making Jackson miss Taylor more and more. Every time she receives a text message from Jackson, her heart beats faster, but also full of anxiety for fear of being discovered by her husband. Jackson keeps texting that he misses her very much, that he can't stop thinking about the times they met. Taylor also feels that her heart can't be at peace when memories of Jackson appear every night. On New Year's Eve, when the whole family was gathering, the atmosphere in the house was warm and bustling. Taylor's husband was entertaining guests, pouring wine and laughing happily with relatives. She tried to act normal, sitting with everyone, but inside she couldn't help but feel nervous and restless. When the phone rang in her pocket, she glanced quickly and saw a text message from Jackson. "Sister, I'm out here, near your house. I miss you so much, I can't stand it anymore. Can you come out to see me?" Taylor felt her heart pounding in her chest. Jackson was right outside, right now, on New Year's Eve, when everyone was gathering together to celebrate the new year. She knew that it was dangerous to go out now, because there were guests at home and her husband was still at home. But Jackson's text message was like an invisible string pulling her out. She couldn't refuse, couldn't resist the desire to see Jackson, even if it was just for a short moment. She glanced at her husband, saw him engrossed in a conversation with friends, then stood up and pretended to go outside to get some air. As she stepped out of the gate, her heart was pounding, a mixture of anxiety and excitement. The street was deserted and quiet, without the hustle and bustle of the day. The light from the peach blossoms and lanterns made the New Year's Eve atmosphere even more magical. She stepped out into the alley and immediately saw Jackson waiting. He was wearing a thick coat, his face full of anticipation and longing. When he saw her, Jackson's eyes lit up with joy, as if he had been waiting for this moment for a long time. "Sister," Jackson said, his voice trembling with emotion, "I miss you so much. I can't stay home without thinking about you." Taylor tried to stay calm, but her heart was pounding when she saw Jackson. Even though she knew that meeting at this time was dangerous, the emotions in her heart made her unable to stop. "Just a little bit," she said softly, her voice faltering. "I have to go home early, no one can know." Jackson didn't need to hear another word. He grabbed her hand, pulling her away from the house. They walked quickly, as if they were running away from reality. Every hotel was closed because of New Year's Eve. Rarely any place was open to welcome guests. Then they stopped at an empty land, where the fields stretched out. In the gentle moonlight, the cool night wind, the fresh air made everything seem more magical. Jackson and Taylor stood in the middle of the vast space of nature, where no one could see them. There were no boundaries, no scrutinizing eyes. Jackson hugged Taylor tightly. The long-suppressed desires seemed to burst out in this moment. His kiss was strong, passionate, as if afraid that tomorrow they would not see each other again. Taylor responded to the kiss, her arms wrapped around Jackson's neck, pulling him closer, her fingers threading through his soft hair, feeling the passion and strength in every movement of Jackson. Their breaths mingled, their heartbeats quickened, their senses were on fire. In the open space of nature, the sound of the wind rustling through the fields, the scent of the earth and sky surrounded them, creating a scene that was both poetic and wild. Taylor knew that this was the most dangerous moment, but it was also the moment that she could not stop. Jackson gently placed her on the soft grass, his eyes looking at her with love and longing. Under the bright moonlight, they were intertwined, nothing but intense passion and the suspense of knowing that at any moment everything could fall apart. Jackson's touches, every kiss, every beat of his body, all made Taylor feel like she was living in a dream. Nothing could stop them now. The sound of both of their heavy breathing echoed in the vast space, blending with the sound of the wind and the surrounding nature. When everything was over, they lay side by side on the grass, their breathing gradually returning to normal. Taylor looked up at the sky, the bright moon above, and felt a moment of peace. But at the same time, the fear quickly returned. She knew that she had gone too far, and this peace was only temporary. Jackson sat up, stroking Taylor's hair, his eyes sparkling in the moonlight. "Let's go home," Jackson whispered. "I don't want you to get in trouble." Taylor nodded, her heart heavy at having to leave Jackson again. They stood up, adjusted their clothes, and quietly headed back. On this emotional New Year's Eve, They knew that no matter how hard they tried, their lives would never be the same again. Taylor walked home, her heart heavy with excitement and lingering longing. The door to her home was right in front of her, and she knew that once she walked through it, she would have to go back to her normal life, to continue hiding her true feelings. But tonight, under the New York sky, in the wild nature, Taylor and Jackson had a moment they would never forget. Time passed, Tet came and went, but that New Year's Eve event was imprinted in Taylor and Jackson's minds like an indelible secret. Although Taylor's husband still didn't know anything, her life continued as usual, but the eye contact with Jackson, or the secret messages, still smouldered like a fire that never went out. Every time her husband went to work, or when she had a little time alone, the memories between the two of them flooded back, filling her heart. Jackson and Taylor continued to keep in touch, but not as frequently or urgently as before. They understood that real life still had to go on. Jackson no longer asked to see her as often as in the early days, but in each message sent back and forth, the longing and desire could not be hidden. It was a relationship that was both strange and close, both taboo and passionate. The dates were now rarer, each time taking place furtively and quickly, as if they knew that everything had to be kept secret forever. Taylor knew she had gone too far, but at the same time she couldn't go back to her previous peaceful life. The excitement and thrill of her relationship with Jackson was so deeply engraved in her mind that she couldn't let it go completely. Every time she was with her husband, she felt a little guilty, but she tried her best to hide it, keeping everything going smoothly as if nothing had happened. Jackson tried to keep his distance, but he still couldn't stop thinking about her. Jackson knew that this relationship had no future, but his feelings for Taylor were not just a short moment of passion. It had crossed the line, becoming a part of him that he couldn't leave behind. Every message from her, every time they secretly met, was like adding fuel to the fire in his heart. Life went on. Taylor's husband still didn't know anything. Everything on the outside was still normal, peaceful as if no storm had happened. But deep inside, both Taylor and Jackson knew that they had fallen into a spiral that could not be turned back. It was a relationship that could not be made public, but could not be stopped either. A secret love that was both sweet and full of fear. They knew that they could hardly live without the magical feelings they had for each other. In the moments when they faced each other, through their eyes, through short messages, they knew that this relationship would continue, even though no one knew where it would go, or if they could keep it a secret forever. Well, let's just go with the flow. When you're hungry or craving something, you have to find something to eat right away, except this is sneaky eating and it's easy to get caught, right? Our story today will stop here. Thank you for taking the time to watch the entire video. Hopefully the details and emotions in the story have brought you interesting and meaningful moments. If you like this video, don't forget to like, share, and leave a comment below the video to let us know your opinion. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any stories in the future. See you in the next videos. Wish you a great day.